Hello. Now, I just finished lunch with a friend here in Macclesfield in the middle of England. I'm having my coffee up in the attic. Now, this is an old house, an old farmhouse actually, built in the 1700s. A wonderful place to be, a beautiful part of the country, and just where I had hoped I would be as I give you iFaith message 88 from Isaiah chapter 6. Before we get into our passage, let's just do a quick review of last time. Last message was called, Come Now, Let Us Reason Together. God's people were doing many sinful things, counterproductive things, things that were actually hurting them. And God reasons with them to do what is right. And to be in a right relationship with them, that is the vertical, the relationship with God above us, we need to be in a right relationship horizontally, that is with, look at the beams of this old house. The horizontal beams are important too. If we're not in a right relationship with our neighbor, then we are not in a right relationship with God. And that's not just something that Jesus taught in Matthew 25 or his brother taught in James 1. This is a consistent teaching of the prophets. We saw last time that Israel was in a very unclean state back in the 8th century BC. And what God is looking for, he wants us to be right with him. Of course, it's good to be right, to follow the truth, to be correct. But the emphasis on believing and correct things is normally subordinated to the emphasis on living the right way, the correct way. That is, being right is more about being upright than about being right on everything. And who can be right in that way? So here we are, iFaith 88, which I've entitled, Here Am I, Send Aaron, an allusion to the book of Exodus. We'll come to that in a moment. In the year that King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, high and exalted, seated on a throne, and the train of his robe filled the temple. Above them were seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they were covering their faces, with 2 they covered their feet, and with 2 they were flying. And they were calling to one another, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. At the sound of their voices, the doorposts and thresholds shook, and the temple was filled with smoke. So let's pause right in the middle of our passage. What's going on? Isaiah has a vision, but this vision is his call. God is calling him to follow him. Now, of course, this would have happened before chapter 1, but it's related later on in the book, here in chapter 6. It says it's the year that King Uzziah died. So we know probably in the year 740 BC. And we come across seraphim, winged, angelic beings who are flying, who are covering their feet and their faces. They seem to be modest, yet they worship God. And we have this 3 times holy, 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 holy. It says they were calling to one another, Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. We see similar language in the book of Revelation. What an image. And it says that the whole temple was shaking, not just vibrating. The doorposts, the threshold shook, almost like an earthquake. The temple is filling with smoke. And notice when Isaiah saw God, it says that the train of his robe filled the temple. So he saw God seated on a throne, and just the train of his robe filled the temple. This is an enormous figure. He's feeling small. And what else to say? Well, that shaking and the smoke is reminiscent of Exodus 19, when Moses goes up on the mountain to give the law. This is a very frightening scene. Let's continue. Woe to me, I cried. I am ruined, for I am a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord Almighty. Oily, oily, woe is me, or woe to me. He feels completely inadequate. Not an uncommon feeling when we're in the presence of God. When we realize who he is, we stop thinking how clever we are or how correct or pure we are. We realize that we are unclean. The prophet says, I'm a man of unclean lips. I live among a people of unclean lips. That is, society is corrupt. He knows that he too is sinful, and he will be cleansed. And what happens here? Well, it says that one of the seraphim flew to me with a live coal in his hand, which he had taken with tongs from the altar, and with it he touched my mouth. So the seraph takes a coal. I think it's red hot, maybe white hot. He takes a coal. Now this is a piece of charcoal that's not hot. I've burned myself plenty of times on making fires in the Scouts and in my attempts to cook. But this was placed on the lips. And his sin is cleansed. And think of the mouth as where sinful words come out, maybe the overflow of the heart. If he's going to bring a message to God's people, he needs cleansing. And so there's a lot of symbolism here as that coal singes and sears the lips. But then he's cleansed. He touched my mouth and said, "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away and your sin atoned for." And then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" And I said, "Here am I, send me." He's not ready for mission before this experience of cleansing. To understand and to embrace God's call, the prophet needs to know who he is and who God is. And when he realizes that God is holy, 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 and he's not, then he's ready. He's ready, having been cleansed, to take the message out. And he says, "Here am I, send me." Key to effective Christian service is conviction of our own sinfulness. Not just conviction of the world's sinfulness. You might think, I'll make a great witness for Christ. I'll be a great evangelist if I have a conviction about the lostness of the world. Well, yes, that's certainly true. If we're deceived by the enemy, the evil one who tells us the world is desirable and we should follow the world and seek the world's values, well, of course, we're not going to be effective. But it's more than just critiquing the world. It's realizing that we are unclean. We too desperately need God's grace. And if that sense is not conveyed, then, well, our ministry is going to be greatly defective. This cleansing is from God. But once cleansed, Isaiah is ready for action. There's a very good parallel in Psalm 51, where David begs for forgiveness. And he says, and then, yes, I'll show sinners your way. I'll evangelize, so to speak. Psalm 51, 10-13. Interestingly, in the Bible, when people are commissioned, and this chapter is Isaiah's calling, his commission, people normally hesitate. You might think of the next prophet, Jeremiah, who says, with my youth, am I really the right choice? Or think of Esther, for example, in a crucial, strategic position to help her people. She's in the household of the Persian king Xerxes, and she has to be nudged by her, her adoptive uncle to take a stand. You must do this. If not, you will perish. And God will work through someone else, but it's time. She needs encouragement. Peter, when he realizes his sinfulness, this is in Luke 5, he's on his knees. The boat is full of fish. He's on his knees in fish. And he says to Jesus, Lord, go away from me. I'm a sinful man. And Jesus says, don't be afraid. From now on, you'll catch men. But it's that sense of inadequacy. You could even think of the calling of King Saul. When he's called, and he has a good beginning, a bad middle, a horrible end, but he's hiding among the baggage. All right, so often it's a very natural thing to hesitate, to doubt that God would really use us. Moses, for sure. In Exodus 3 and 4, he gives us a whole series of excuses. And eventually he says, God, please send someone else. Send Aaron, my brother, he can do it. He's a better speaker than me. And maybe you've heard that phrase before. Here, my Lord, send Aaron. But this is not the way Isaiah responded, though it's the way we've responded, you and I, many times. Well, then the Lord says what the message is, and the prophet says, well, for how long? I can deliver the message for how long? And basically God says, until the bitter end. and Isaiah ministered for decades and decades until, according to Jewish tradition, in the reign of the next king, the King Manasseh, until he was persecuted. The king after Hezekiah, Isaiah was sawn in two with a wood saw. He paid a price for that. So for how long? And God says, well, until there's nothing left, or there's no one else to preach to. You don't back down. Well, what does this mean for you and me? This message of cleansing and mission. And this is not a talk on evangelism, though that's directly connected to the point. It's not a talk on becoming more outgoing, though that's okay. This is not a talk with any particular agenda except what we see here in the Bible. That if we identify with the prophet and we appreciate God's cleansing and we've truly been cleansed by him and our lips have been cleansed, then we're going to have a message. It will affect what we do, what we say. Think of the blind man who's healed in John 9. He is then sent to the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So it's that connection between cleansing and mission. When we realize we've been cleansed, that affects what we do, how we live, what we say. And if we've forgotten our cleansing, like in 2 Peter 1, then we stop growing. So I think this is a crucial message from the Old Testament, but for every person now that we live under the New Testament. So what's the application? Well, I can put it in a sentence pretty easily. When we forget the grace shown to us, we cease to care whether God shows grace to others. If you're not reaching out to those who don't know Christ, if you've ceased to care, maybe you need a renewing of this kind of experience. You need that hot coal to be touched to your lips. You need to have a vision of God who's far bigger than you. And a humble response, saying, I'm here, I'm available, send me. What should I say? I'll say it. How long should I do it? Okay, I will not back off. I will do what you say, Lord. And when we appreciate God's grace, that's a powerful motivation. But when we forget, we simply stop caring whether God shows grace to others, like Jonah in Jonah 2 inside the fish. Please think about this. This is a serious point. And I have more to say, more to share from Isaiah. And the next talk will be in Isaiah chapter 10, looking at different tools that God uses. Anyway, you'll just have to wait until then. That's all for iFaith 88. Thanks for listening. Hope you guys are well. Bye-bye.